Good evening and welcome to the Varietal Show. My name is Rory and you're watching Varietal Literature's YouTube channel. If you've never been here before, well, welcome. Thank you for coming by and watching. If you came in on one of the Fireside Fairy Tales, we do those Tuesday nights. This isn't me reading stories, so judge your interest accordingly. What we do tonight is we play we play new solo tabletop RPGs, things like that. And we try to use it mainly as a way to sort of write together. And when I say together, I mean there's a live chat here and you can join it. Give ideas out, try to work in whatever I hear and find as long as they're relatively appropriate. And by the end of it, about an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, we come up with something of a story or a scene or a vignette. It's a write-along, basically, where I play a bit of a tabletop RPG. If you're not watching it live, though, down in the description below, there will be timestamps next to major things that occur in the stream. And you can just sort of jump ahead to whatever interests you, including the results, if you just want to know the story we came up with, or if you just want to know how the game works, or whatever else. And I see that down in the live chat, we have Witchery, who says, substitute Santa. I doubt he's getting paid. No, Santa is kind of notorious for the labor violations, isn't he? And Jumpstore is back. Hello, Jumpstore. It's good to see you again. How's it going? It is going well. We'll see if I keep this sweater on. I did it for seasonal reasons, but my ancestors come from like Norway and the Orkney Islands, so I can. I'm the kind of person who wears a t-shirt when it's freezing out, so we'll see how this goes. And GS is in the chat. Good evening, GS. I hope everyone's doing well. We're sort of officially into our seasonal stuff at this point. So I don't know. Maybe that interests you, maybe it doesn't. But let me talk about the game we're playing tonight. This part of the show is called litgames, stands for literature games, which just means basically writing prompts from a game structure that we then write with. It's mainly about writing, to be honest. Sometimes we play stuff that's a little more gamey, but that won't be the case tonight. We're just sort of using a prompt structure. What they call those, it varies, but it's like itch.io physical games is kind of indie physical games. In this case tonight, it's a solo journaling game about being a replacement for Santa, but not necessarily the one that probably should be doing it. And it is called The Claws. There's a pun there because it's spelled as claws. The Claws of the Substitute Santa. And Witchery being in Australia in the chat there says, it is already December there. Yes, but your Decembers are also very different than ours, as I understand it. The Claws of Substitute Santa. I'm just going to sort of read the premise here. The way we play is pretty straightforward, too. Here we go. You are a horrible monster. Now, they don't mean like you in your nature are horrible, and I don't plan to play this that way, but you physically are terrifying, horrible, offensive to all the senses. But you owe Santa Claus a favor. And so the first thing, chat, you need to be considering is, why do we, a horrible cryptid, owe Santa Claus a favor? Big Red is taken, that's their name for Santa Claus, is taken mighty sick, and it's Christmas Eve. They're calling it all their favors, getting people to sub in and make some deliveries, and that means you've got to leave the safety of your cozy cave, grab a sack, that's a sentence, and get to ho-ho-hoing. Don't mess it up, and have a Merry Christmas. Then it says how to play. Okay, so the way it works is, I'm not going to read the whole thing here, is basically you need a d20. I have several. If you're watching this stream, there's a good chance you have one. Not necessarily, I guess. And then you need what most people just call a dice, but what we in the nerd community call d6s. You need these. This you don't necessarily need if you don't care about having like a forced finish to the game, but you need the d20. And the core of the game is you're going to go to different houses and you're going to deliver gifts. It doesn't tell you what the gifts are, but it tells you what the house is. And when you roll your d20, we're going to compare it to this list of 20 little sentences here that tell us about whose house we went to. And we're just going to write about whatever comes to mind based on what we read, how that delivery goes. Probably not well. So that's the roll of the d20. It gives us our prompts for our deliveries. The d6, on the other hand, every time we go to a house, they have what's called a night tracker. And every house you go to, you add 1 point to your night tracker, and then you roll a d6. And as long as you don't roll or below your night tracker score, there's still time left to deliver gifts. As soon as you roll above it, so let's say we had, sorry, the other way around. As soon as you roll below it, rather, you still have time for more deliveries. So in other words, if we went to 3 houses and then we rolled a 2, the sun's coming up, we're out of time. And it's just a way of sort of forcing the end of the game. It's not really necessary, but I don't know if I'll use it here. I guess we will. Witchery says, grab a sack and get to ho-ho-hoing, ... question mark. Was exactly my thoughts. You've articulated them well. I have at least 50 d20 right next to me. I have managed to resist being a full dice goblin. However, my partner, it would probably be easier to measure it in weight for the amount of dice they have. Anyways, but the first thing we have to do is we have to design our horrible creature, which doesn't involve any prompts. It just involves us being creative. Hey, Big Drew's here. Hello. Big Drew is a regular attendee of the Lit Games. So the first thing we'll need to do is design a horrid monster that is yourself. Ouch. You need to describe 3 monstrous details. Think about how you know Santa Claus, why you owe them a favor, and what your usual haunt is. In other words, where you would normally hide. You may discover while playing the game that some of your initial ideas about yourself were wrong. That's okay. In other words, let's start there, because character development, of course, can take a long time. Chat, let's do our little bit of backstory and description. Who are we? So, name 3 terrible cryptid features. And what was it? Location that we normally live in, caves, wells, under bridges, whatever. Santa favor. Just briefly, why we owe Santa a favor. Witchery says maybe we got stuck somewhere and Santa saved us on a sleigh. Okay. Exactly the nature of that will depend on our physical features, I guess. Got stuck and Santa saved us. Okay, the name. I don't know, Crimboblin? Trying to think of something cryptid-y. They always have very strange names. Like, what the hell? Well, I guess, I don't know. I hesitate to name something. I was going to name a cryptid, and then I realized maybe it's a reference in another language, and I don't want to make fun of that. But they seem strange to me. A Crimboblin, I'm open to better names than that. I just want to get us moving. We need 3 terrible cryptid features. It's gonna auto-indent. GS says side of a mountain. Okay. Cave on the side of a frozen mountain. 3 terrible cryptid features. I'll stick with what I said in the advertising. A foul stench that can drive mere mortals mad. Nogman, like eggnog. Santa helped you escape from getting, I'll shorthand it. This is from Jump Store. Santa helped us escape when we got caught philandering. Maybe we got caught philandering with a Sasquatch wife. Or husband. Depending on our cryptid. That can drive, not van drive. GS says drools. How about has 15 mouths that are constantly drooling, but we travel on our drool like a slug. Yeah, like a slug. I hope they were nose blind. Yeah. I do like the idea of Nogman. Kremboblin the Nogman. How about that? So, here's a fun fact about me. I am a sucker for stupid word play and things like that. Like there's a bit from Key and Peele, if you know who those are, where they're just listing names, the ridiculous names of new football people that have just been recruited into football teams. I think is the most accessible way I can phrase that. And it's just them listing increasingly stupid names. And it's like a thing you either giggle incessantly at, or you're like, what's the matter with that person? For me, it's just it just kills me. Krimoblin the Nogman is gonna get me every time. Witchery says, somehow more horrifying than our Halloween games. Yes, but here, I'll make it seasonal. Constantly drooling, thick eggnog. GS says, I'm not having an extramarital affair with 15 drooling mouse. What about 14? Where's the line? How many do we have to go down here? Jumpstar says, massive Medusa hair snakes that get a little too excited around Christmas lights. I'm a sucker for animals behaving adorably. Love it. A broad mane of writhing snakes whom love, probably just two because they're the subject, not the object, who love the bright lights of Christmas. Okay. All right. We're not going too blue. I wouldn't say this is a kid's show, but I'm not going to go too blue. There has to be some sort of hair thing if it's a cryptid. Holly's House says, yeah, we just got it. A bunch of snakes. A moment of silence for Santa's reindeer for having met us. Well, that gives me an idea for our opening line. So let's do the opening scene here. Oh yeah, I got stuck. What's the name of the other gibbering mass in Lovecraft's story? The one that goes up the hill and like howls. Oh, what is it called? It's one of like the iconic original true Cthulhu cycle Lovecraft monsters. I can't think of its name. Yes, also, hi, Holly's House. Oh, Genera's here. Shoggoths! Thank you. Got stuck in the closet of a Shoggoth. Having an extramarital affair. Santa saved us from the wrath of a returning Cthulhu spawn. All right, we're off to a weird start. Okay, I'm just gonna start on the next page. Yeah, Crimboblin is what we called him. Crimboblin was not aware that reindeers could scream until he finally met one as he slid towards Old St. Nick's palatial mansion. Jump Store says, I love H.P. Lovecraft horror. I mean, so do I. I'm just very bad at names. I'm gonna put this closer for a moment. This is actually for drinks. You can, he has hollow eyes here, and was originally designed for the place I got it from. You'd buy it, and you would get the mug with it. You put dry ice in here and a little bit of water, and it's his eyes smoke. And then on the back here is a straw hole. You drink out of the straw. Witchery says, game probably expected us to go the Yeti or something, and here we are making the world wish it didn't have eyes. Hey, that isn't that what it says on the playlist for this? Lit games will make you wish you didn't have eyes. Perhaps it was the bulbous, ill-defined form of Crimboblin being more of a bloated maggot than any recognizable creature. Or perhaps it was that its mane of wild snakes stitched deep into its translucent flesh. Why? What? It's the first thing of Christmas. Why am I doing body horror? How did this happen? What have you done, chat? What are you doing to me? This is your fault. I'm taking zero responsibility for myself for the words that I'm writing, not you. As is reasonable. Or perhaps it was that its mane of wild snakes stitched deep into its translucent flesh were delighted by the blinking gemstone lights that set the eyes aglow when they looked upon Jump Story, that's a nice recreation of the idol from Call of Cthulhu. I'm impressed. I have a cookie jar that looks like it. I agree. I didn't expect that at all to be as good as it was. I knew it existed before I went. Unfortunately, the place that did it is closed now. I think there's one still in Toronto, though. I think you can buy them online. If you already have one that's a cookie jar, there's no point. Oh, Zombie Wolf. What did I miss? We're playing a game where we are a solo tabletop RPG, solo journaling game. See if I can say solo a few more times. Where we are playing a creature we've called Crimboblin the Nogman, who has 15 mouths that drool Okay, we just did this, so I'm just going to make sure I got it all straight. Has 15 mouths that drool eggnog that we travel on like a slug trail. Has a mane of snakes that love Christmas lights. And smells terrible. And Santa wants us to deliver gifts for him. That's the premise of the game. So we're just doing the intro scene. And then I'm going to roll something and we're going to deliver a gift. Depending on how time works out, that might be all we do. We're delighted by the blinking, not blinked, gemstone lights that set the eyes aglow. Set their eyes aglow with festive joy. Or, even more probably, perhaps the reindeer merely smelled the uncanny mix of necrotic rot and sweet spiced eggnog that followed Crimboblin everywhere he went. Zombie Wolf says, sounds like the setup of either a great Christmas horror, Christmas comedy, or what the hell, why not both? Yeah, I don't know. We were talking about how this is the more horrifying than anything we did in Halloween. Okay. Crimboblin was nearly at the door of Santa's abode, ready to squeeze through his window when Santa cried out. Okay, through his door, through his front door. Why complicate it? When Santa cried out. Oh my god. Chat is making this worse. In the best way. Jump Store says eggnog is delicious. I look forward to it every year. And then the other opinion, and if there really is only two, of eggnog is I hate eggnog, so this is a personal monster for me. And here's the thing. I love eggnog, but when I was younger, I didn't like eggnog. And then at some point, I began to like it. But I also used to like mayonnaise, and now I quite like mayonnaise. So maybe it's just the thickness of egg. So I guess it's just... how do you like your eggnog if you like it? And what's a festive drink for you if you don't like eggnog? When Santa cried out from his fourth story window. I keep wanting to emphasize how rich Santa is. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Crimboblin! You confusing old fellow. No need to bother yourself coming into my clean foyer. He paused and coughed himself into a gag. Then swallowed and continued speaking. Oh yeah, that's right. Witchery's in Australia, so eggnog, as they say, is not the best for warm weather. Holly's House says, apple cider, you can see through it. It can't hide any evil. I don't know. The only evil that eggnog is hiding is cholesterol. Gennaro says, I love eggnog, but only one in the house that does. You see, that's tough because eggnog doesn't have a long shelf life. And if you're the only one drinking it, you're either basically drinking a pint of ice cream in a week or it goes bad. That's rough. I have a sous vide and I'm like a food nerd. So I make this, this sort of eggnog. It's like a thin custard, I guess, that you then charge in a whip can. I wouldn't call it whipping cream. It's not really that. And you put that on coffee. And it sort of melts into the coffee and has a bit of foam on top from it. That's probably my favorite eggnog thing I do. He paused and coughed himself into a gang, then swallowed and continued speaking. Unfortunately, my dear old eldritch horror, Witchery says, Rory, a nerd? Why, I never. You'd be surprised how many people do not anticipate it. I think it's because I'm 6'5" and I look like I should be into sports. Not that I'm fit, but I just sort of look like I should be into sports. I got that face. And then I'm like, I don't know, I'm bad at sports. How many dice do you have? I don't think people expect it. Zombie Wolf says, I make my own eggnog because I don't like the taste of nutmeg. So I make it with cinnamon and a smidgen of ginger. I'm mildly allergic to ginger, so I can't do the ginger thing, but it does sound good. Is there some way I can spin this off into me talking about cooking? Because I love cooking. My dear old eldritch horror. I am far too sickly to deliver my gifts, and I have had to call in my favors. I need you to deliver some of my gifts this year. The fat old man laughed and coughed until his cheeks were rosy. Witchery says, I'm 6'3" and my center of gravity is trash for most sports. Yes, one of the only competitive sports I did like a full season of was traditional Greco-Roman wrestling. And let me tell you, being 6'5" is not beneficial to that. I lost everything constantly because it's all about low center of gravity, and I don't know why I did it. It was like the worst thing I could have done. There are sports where your height helps, and that ain't it. The fat old man laughed and coughed until his cheeks were rosy. But Kremboblin... Zombie Wolf says, I live alone and eggnog doesn't keep for long. Yeah, that'll do it. I usually shrink the recipe down to at least 6 eggs. Unless I'm baking eggnog-flavored holiday treats, then I'll make a huge batch. Yummy, yummy. I do wonder how well it keeps in the freezer. Like, I assume it just splits. But I've never actually tried it. Oh no, not wrestling Rory. It was like baby Rory. This is like grade 9. But Kremboblin raised what could charitably be called an eyebrow and said, but the mere sight of my what's a very Lovecraftian term? I know he likes non-Euclidean. He does that a lot, but that doesn't work here. Whatever. Who cares if it makes sense? Well, we all know. I'm writing this story in an hour. Of my non-Euclidean form. But the mere sight of my non-Euclidean form and my uncanny stench drives even the most stalwart mortals to madness, old fellow. Jumpstore says, I'm 4'11", but on the bright side, I was great at playing hide and seek as a kid. There's a sport for every height. I'm sure there is something you can do way better than anybody else, such as hide and seek. No shame in being 4'11". Height is a bit overrated, like being tall. It's a bit overrated, I will say. Holly's House says, stop talking about drinking eggs. I just ate dinner. Holly's House, maybe never watch Rocky. But, you know, with height, you get more joint problems. And as Witchery pointed out, you know, your center of balance is weird. And also, people just view you as basically equipment when you're tall. They're like, no, you're the only one who can do it, so you're going to come here and do it, even if you're busy with other stuff. Like, you just become the world's crane. Yes, Witchery says, you run into the signs they put on aisles at the stores. Yes, you run into things that people don't even look at. Yes, it does. That's true, Jumpstore. It was always unclear to me if H.P. Lovecraft actually understood anything he was saying. I don't think he did. That's why I'm putting it in here, because like any human is non-Euclidean, but it's very Lovecraftian. The most stalwart mortals to madness, old fellow. Now, there's a place for everyone in Santa's great projects. And I'm sure you haven't forgotten how I covered for you with that terrible squid man. Be a shame. Every version of Santa I've ever done is kind of a jerk, just as a heads up. Jumpstore said, nope, he didn't. Yeah. I always said that Lovecraft is a person who succeeds in spite of himself. Like, he has a lot of emotional honesty, but he doesn't think he's doing a lot of emotional honesty. He thinks he's writing about real concerns. But all he's really doing is sort of creating a narrative based around his own neuroses, which is actually kind of fascinating. It is unfortunately that one of his neuroses was just literally anybody who wasn't white. That mars the work a bit, but it's also weirdly honest in how he puts things together. GS says, I always wanted to be shorter. That's unusual. I mean, that's fine. I can't see half my fridge without crouching. Oh yeah, you get a lot of neck problems because like just everything is inside. Like I'm on my laptop right now. My laptop is like down here, which is fine for most people because most people are down here. But I'm up here, and so like if I'm doing my laptop, I'm like this. Also, this mic that I have, I need like actual mic. It never really reaches my mouth. It's on top of like books right now. It'd be a shame if he were to identify that fluid he found in his wife and his Shoggoth. I don't know if there's any point in giving a gender to a Shoggoth and in his Shoggoth partner's room. Santa said with a smile that felt a bit evil. Zombie Wolf says it's okay, Santa himself is a jerk. He's way he judges kids. Childhood is the shortest period of life and should be treasured. Oh, that's very sweet. In my D&D games, if we run any of that are around because I'm a GM, our Santa consistently shows up and gives gifts, but he is hard racist against elves. He only sees them as servants. And so if any character's playing an elf, he'll like give them shoe shine kits or something to shine the other people's boots. He's just a jerk. But now my games also have Frau Gauden, who leads the Wild Hunt. And she gives cool gifts. But what she doesn't like is weak magic. She likes sheer brawn. If you don't know who Frau Gauden is, you should watch our Tuesday night show, where I talked about the Wild Hunt last year. Frau Gauden is a regional German folklore character who leads the Wild Hunt. Santa said with a smile that felt a bit evil. Kremboblin knew better than to continue challenging the Red Tyrant. He nodded, sort of. What could be called his head, and gulped back some of his nog ooze with his 15 mouths. Do I need to write another sentence, or have we reached the bottom? It's like, how is gulped back some of his nog ooze with his 15 mouths gonna lead anywhere better? He nodded what could be called his head and gulped back. A group of giggling elves Jumpstore says, I love the Wild Hunt story where a man's boot got filled with dog poo only for him to go home and realize it turned to gold. You know what's wild about that trope? It comes up in a few different places, but what's wild about that trope is depending on the culture, it goes either way. In, I think, Celtic, if my memory is serving, you will get gold that turns to poo. And in Germanic and sometimes Nordic, you get poo that turns to gold. And of course, they're like, I don't want to. I guess the moral of the story is pick up after your dog. Pick after Frau Gauden's daughter hounds. A group of giggling elves who were contractually... I don't remember putting anything on this list with the lyrics. Who were contractually obligated to giggle. Carried out a sack of gifts then tossed them to the snakes along Kremboblin's back. Kremboblin began the long crawl into a customized I just forgot how a word worked there for a moment. A long crawl into a customized sled led by a group of goats, group of enchanted goats. Apparently, the reindeer went on strike when they realized who they would be dragging. Witcher says, I heard a theory about the coal. It was mostly because people needed to be warm and couldn't always afford presents. I mean, that makes sense. I think I've always kind of assumed that. Witchery says, so it's a punishment in that it's not a fun gift, but it isn't an actual punishment. And yeah, somebody else pointed out down there, Witchery does, like getting socks. Although, to be honest, I think I've burned through all my socks, and I hate, like, it's annoying to go buy socks, so it's nice when people buy socks. You know who has great socks, if you have them in your area, is, I'm blanking on the name. It's like a Japanese Gap store that has opened a bunch of locations in Canada. They have good socks. I'll think of their name eventually. And then they started talking about fruitcake, which I unironically like. There's a lot of things that I'm not supposed to like desserts or whatever, like raisins, for example. I don't know. I don't understand the hate for them. People say, oh, raisin cookies suck or whatever. I mean, that's fine if that's your taste, but I don't understand the aggression about it. Witchery said, yeah, but most kids don't want socks. What do kids know? Nothing, I tell you. They gotta listen to their elders, who aren't me, of course, because I am forever young in my mind. Customized sled led by a group of enchanted goats. Apparently the reindeer went on strike when they realized who they'd be dragging. Grimboblin waved his snakes and gurgled in a percussive manner resembling the famous ho, ho, ho. But the elves were drinking up his trail of nog slime and failed to notice his departure into the snowy skies. Man, that took way too long to put together. Gennaro says, I actually request socks now. Make them fun socks. Yeah, I had some socks that had a bunch of famous oil paintings on them, like and sculptures, like the sculpture of David and stuff. Those were fun. Zombie Wolf says, I make what I refer to as edible fruitcake. I make a basic white cake and fill it with an assortment of berries. Make a glaze icing for the cake and use a syrup mixed with from the mixed berries juices. Oh, that sounds good. Witchery says, you know, it needs the booze. Oh, GS says Uniqlo. That's the name. Yeah, Uniqlo socks are good. If you just want some color, but still basically wearable. Because one of the problems is a lot of socks are too thick. Okay. Well, we're finally going to play the game proper by rolling here. There's our introduction. We've established our character. So to do this, I got to roll a d20. I rolled a 10. A couple moved in together at the start of December. They've not finished unpacking, so you'll need to weave around bags and boxes. Okay, so if you guys have never played a game like this before, I think most of you have, but if you haven't, we get a prompt, and then we just try to think of ways that that prompt produces story, and, you know, conflict and drama and humor and whatever else. You know, some are more serious. This one, obviously, we're not going with serious. Jumpstore says, I like thick, fluffy socks. My feet get cold easily, and I like wearing those in bed on cold winter nights. I don't think I've been cold since I was 12. I just don't get cold. I'm trying to think if there's any exception to that. Yeah, I guess once. Since I was a kid. I was in a further north than where I am now in Canada, and in January. It was a place that gets down to like -30, and then there was wind chill on top of that, and I was wearing my jacket. It was the first time, it was a down jacket. It was the first time I've ever experienced wind that just made it like there was no jacket. It just cut right through it. So that was a little too cold. Okay, a couple moved in together at the start of December. What does their house look like? Jump Store says being Canadian and a man gives you an unfair advantage. Yeah. Even though Canadian alone doesn't... a lot of Canada is actually pretty mild and mostly just rainy, but like my partner isn't good with this stuff, but in particular me, because I think I just have the bloodline for it. Like the people, my people, at least part of my family, came here as lumberjacks from Norway. So like tall, blonde, blue-haired, or blue-eyed rather, blue-haired and blonde-eyed, and really good in the cold. What do we think this couple's house looks like? They've not finished unpacking, so you'll need to... I mean, see, this is the problem. Like, why would this couple have a house? I know that for our generation, they'd be in, like, a condo. Not a condo. Not even a condo. They'd just be in an apartment. Oh, dear. Jump Store says, I do not have the blood for it. My family is from Sicily. Why have they abandoned you in the cold? Yeah, I remember when I was up there, I had a cab driver who was from southern India. And I was like, how are you doing this, man? Like, this is, like, not, like, India's huge, and there are very cold areas in India. But he was from, like, I forget exactly where, but somewhere in southern India where it was quite hot. Of course, he was a cab driver and he didn't want to complain. Maybe it's a cottage? Oh! You know what it would be? The quintessential millennial, I want to own a house. Tiny house. It's got to be a tiny house. Also known as just a trailer park. Like, I saw somebody who was advertising, like, a tiny house lot. Or something like this. And I was like, what is it with my generation and renaming things? It's a trailer park. That's a trailer park. We live in a trailer park, which is fine. It's an abode. It's your own. You can make some noise. They've been around forever. But no, we got to call it tiny home, I don't know, community or something. Conversely, most of my bloodline is Scottish or English, and they put me here. Oof. Oof. A lot of Scottish, not as much English in me. Scottish and Norwegian, and a smattering of other things. As is often the case for white folk who live in the colonies. Oh. Jump Store says they left Sicily because the lemon tree crops went bad. The lemons are a very fickle crop. I was reading about that time that an eruption in Iceland caused a famine, and how that likely caused the French Revolution, or at least tipped it over. To be fair, tiny houses are like upgraded trailers. They try to actually look more like houses most of the time. They do, but like what I'm trying to say is I think it's basically people who, without going too deep into it, people who are trying to disassociate themselves from certain class markers that they don't want to feel like they're a part of, rather than just embracing who they are and the situation they're in and whatever else, and not being so judgmental about it. But this is going to completely detract from the tone I'm going for here. This is not Rory's social theory hour. Okay, they're not... Okay, so they... give me a last name. I don't care what it is, but it's got to be a last name, a real one. Ancestry says my witchery says my ancestor was wrongly accused of theft and sent to the antipodes. Oh yeah. I guess that is probably the story of a lot of people down there, eh? That's sort of you don't hear that angle as much because they talk about it being a prison colony or whatever else for Britain. As if Britain had some perfect legal system at the time, and rather than just it was a place to dump people who were causing you trouble. Gennaro says, oh yes, personally I wouldn't mind living. I wouldn't mind living in one. It's fine. Zombie Wolf is talking about how their grandparents used to live in a converted mobile home, and they were in the middle of nowhere, and then other people came along and ruined it. Okay. I'm putting up the Stewardsons for now. The Stewardsons were a young couple. Oh, what should be their gift? Okay, so the Stewardsons were a young couple, and is there a better description I have? The Stewardsons were two handsome young men who had lived on their own for much for less than 2 months before moving in with one another. Ooh, kayak. Good idea, Genera. They were a sporty and active couple, but they were young. And used to their family filling the gaps on their chores. Zombie Wolf says, what should be their gift? Well, that depends on the rating of this stream. I kind of go PG-13 or 14A. Like I wouldn't say it's necessarily for kids, but I guess I try to aim for a balance where if your kid's in the background, it's not going to be the end of the world. Yeah, I don't know if that's confusing at all. So probably not what you think. So fair enough. But they were a sporty and active couple, but they were young and were accustomed to. How about that? I don't really like the phrase used to. Thus, when Crimboblin arrived at their small, slender trailer, which they had... we'll come back to that. Near a mountain bike trail. His first observation was of the windows being blocked by unopened moving boxes. Witcher says, don't want to get deplatformed. Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'm not famous enough to worry too much about that. It's just where the realm of content that I know what to do something with. I'm not really a prude or anything. I'm trying to think of how to like balance who I know comes and watches the stream. Gennaro says innuendos, but no explicit. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Yeah. I mean, we obviously have innuendos. We had on the folklore stream on Tuesday, there was a moment in it where a person walks through a door and as a gift, a bucket pours gold on them. And they basically call it a golden shower. And, it was hard to ignore how I knew the internet would think about that. So I just made a little nod to it, but like I didn't actually identify it. His first observation was of the windows being blocked by unopened moving boxes. When he slithered in for a closer look, he found that the path was winding. Jumpstore says, reminds me of how hard it is to find an uncensored version of 1001 Arabian Nights. Yeah, that's a pretty adult collection of stories. I will say that. There are a couple of reasons why I wouldn't read it. The content on some of them for sure, but also, I don't know, like the further I get from my own cultural background, the more I feel like maybe I shouldn't be the one telling the story. So, I mean, I'm on the fence. And then there's also some bad translations that carry over some bad colonial ideas and stuff with those. So, I mean, it's a tough one for sure. But some of the stories are wild and interesting. And to say that Aladdin was based on it, the Disney movie, is technically true. But let me tell you, there's barely anything in common between the two, which is fine. Aladdin's a good story in and of itself. Richard Burton's translation wasn't so bad, but I haven't found a complete collection of that myself. I don't think I've read that one, though. I'll have to check it out. When he slithered in for a closer look, he found that the path was a winding... was a circuitous romp through half-filled bags of leaves, stacks of old newspapers, and other such detritus. Jumpstore says the Aladdin story was much more hilarious. Yeah, for sure. He was such a lazy disappointment that his own father died from the shame of having him for a son. I do appreciate how folklore is just way more bonkers than you could ever get away with in anything else. Stacks of old newspapers and other such detritus. As Crimboblin grew closer to the trailer, he could hear inside an argument. Was taking place. One voice shouted, "My God, man. How have you used all the bowls already? I just washed them last week." A deeper voice replied, "Bowls? You're worried about the bowls? I have no socks because you won't change the dryer out. It's been 3 weeks. Jump Store says you only wash the dishes every week. Yeah, that's my point. My point is that they were both. I'm nailing on this. I have this theory that if you're young, and by young I mean like graduated high school, but in your early 20s, late teens, and you decide to move out from your parents' house directly in with your partner. This isn't going to be true of everybody. It's going to depend a lot about how your house was, obviously. But for a lot of people, what happens is they don't understand the little chores that parents do even well into high school. They just keep track of some stuff in the background with you because they're used to doing it. And if you don't live on your own for a little bit of time, what can happen is you just don't realize how much other people are doing stuff for you. And so then you go into a home with your new partner or whatever, and you just, things are getting crappy, and they weren't crappy when you weren't with your partner. And so you start blaming your partner for it. Because you assume they're the change. Zombie Wolf says, change the dry out and clean the lint or get a new dryer. And GS says, don't forget the Xmas lights and the excited snake hair. It's not my responsibility. Oh, Amy's here. Hello. And Jump Store says, easy solution, be a germaphobe and live alone. Everything's gonna sparkle. That's a good point. It's not my responsibility to load the dryer and empty it. You have to do something. Well, it's not my responsibility to collect up all the bowls you leave in your room. By now, the argument was becoming heated. But Crimboblin knew the solution. Each partner would have to agree to a schedule of chores evenly split between them. For as they move into this new phase of life where their parents no longer managed the chores, they had to learn the intricacies of a couple's independence. Crimboblin wished he could explain this to them, but to expose himself would violate Santa's protocol. So instead, he started searching for a place to leave their dual kayak. An object half the length of their whole home. Oh God. I'm unfortunately horrifying people with this germiness. I apologize. I'm not trying to trigger anybody. I'm just trying. I just think of people I've known at this age. Jumpstore says, my brother used to put garbage in the kitchen sink? What? It annoyed me so much I told him that unless it can be washed, it does not go in the sink. He's the older one. I don't think age is going to undo a thought like that. I don't even know kids who do that. The hell? That's psychotic. I mean, I don't know your brother. Maybe otherwise a nice person, but honestly, if I was walking along a road alone and like I said hello to someone and they just sort of started a conversation and then said they put garbage in the sink, I'd be like, I don't know. I'd phone the cops. Be like, I'm concerned for my safety. I would. I'm kidding. However, the one thing the couple did do well was decorate their small trailer with many blinking lights. This meant this was the particular delight of Crimboblin's mane of snakes. Zombie Wolf says, the kitchen is my sanctuary. If I have anyone over, they know the one room they can't access under any circumstances is my kitchen. I'm not so direct about it, but it's heavily implied. Get out of my kitchen. What's your favorite piece of kitchen equipment? For me, it's probably a tie between my my Lodge cast iron and my sous vide. Two things that have like been the most consistently useful. This was the particular delight of Crimboblin's mane of snakes, who just loved the lights of Christmas. And they began to hiss and rattle in celebration of the beautiful presentation upon the eaves of the house. This was just enough ruckus to draw the attention of the couple, though. Crimboblin, realizing they were coming out to check the yard, opened. If anyone just came into the stream and missed when we put this creature together, you're in for a sentence here. Opened his 15 mouths and vomited his nog goo so he could slip silently into the bushes. GS says Ninja Foodie. Oh, that's that. Does like 15 things. Does that work pretty well? Jumstore says probably my food presser. It's a Ninja and the blades have stayed sharp for years. Good food presser. Food processor can do a lot of things. Zombie Wolf says for me, I'd say my hand mixer. I have weak tendons in my wrist. I got bad wrists too. Not quite the tendons, but I got bad wrists. So the hand mixer is a lifesaver. I really like the one I have right now. Nice. Do you know the brand of it? I am that nerdy about kitchen equipment. I will say that. And vomited his nog goo so he could slip silently into the bushes. He tossed the wrapped kayak behind him and watched as the boys found it in their yard. They smiled at first, and Crimboblin felt the warm joy of Christmas. In his pouch of 6 dozen hearts. But then they saw the trail of Nagu into their bushes and became concerned. They called out and grew closer. So Crimboblin decided this was fate. The real gift he would give this year was the gift of marital advice. He cleared his 15 throats. Hamilton Beach. Hamilton Beach is like really good, sort of like you didn't break the bank, but it'll stay there with you. I like a Hamilton Beach. Jumstore says, nice to make the distinction that these are specifically donor hearts. I'd hate for a protagonist to be a murderer. No, of course not. It's just people who had some extra hearts around. I wouldn't say I've thought too deeply on it. It just sounded funny to me. He cleared his 15 throats and began to speak about their troubles and how to solve them as he slid out of the bushes. My dear children, what you must do is make a schedule where both of you, Crimboblin, began. But then the boys interrupted with a blood-curdling scream. So long and loud that one collapsed into his weakened legs, and the other, still screaming, began to try to drag his partner away from the eldritch horror. Though this was complicated as his partner was weeping in terror and slipping on the foul eggnog leavings. Streaked across their yard. Crimboblin tried to reassure them by stating that he was Santa Claus. And he came in peace. He then began to whistle an approximation of a Christmas of, let's say, silver bells from all of his 15 bubbling mouths at once. At last, the boys found peace as both passed out in terror and slipped into the first of a lifetime's worth of repeating nightmares. Though they no longer engage with the Santa myth and sweat when the name is even mentioned. It is said that they keep their yard and floor very clean now, just in case it grew out of the mess. The end. Zombie Wolf says, if he has a mass of writhing snakes, did he name each one of them? Yes, he did. Of course, he knows them all. I don't care how many there are, I would have named every single one of them. You know what it's like? It's like Santa's reindeer. You know? He's got slithers and slothers. Slathers. Bitey and Nighty and Aspy. I don't know. You guys come up with names if you want. All right. Lots of great recommendations tonight. Thanks, guys. I'm going to do the thing where I read it all back. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's because you just want to know the results, and what a bunch of results we came up with. Chat was very helpful today, and that, as you know, means that everything is horrifying. What we did here is a crime against art, but a fun one. This was playing a game called The Claws of the Substitute Santa. And what it is we are an eldritch horror, or a cryptid, or a monster of terrible proportions, who owes a favor to Santa. Santa's sick, and so we have to deliver the gifts. And so we roll a dice to find out where we go. And we spent most of the time building the creature and setting up the first scene and how the creature acts. But we did get to delivering a gift, and I'm going to read you that story now. Okay. Kremboblin was not aware that reindeers could scream until he finally met one as he slid toward Old St. Nick's palatial mansion. Perhaps it was his bulbous, ill-defined form, or the bulbous, ill-defined form of Kremboblin, being as he was more of a bloated maggot than any recognizable creature, or perhaps it was that its mane of wild snakes, stitched deep into his translucent flesh, were delighted by the blinking gemstone lights that set their eyes aglow with festive joys, and therefore terrified the reindeer. Or even more probably, perhaps the reindeer merely smelled the uncanny mix of necrotic rot and sweet-spiced eggnog that followed Kremboblin everywhere he went. Crimboblin was nearly at the door of Santa's abode, ready to squeeze through his front door, when Santa cried out from his fourth-story window, "Oh, ho, 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 ho! Crimboblin, you confusing old fellow! No need to bother yourself coming into my clean foyer." He paused and coughed himself into a gag, then swallowed and continued speaking. "Unfortunately, my dear old eldritch horror, I am far too sickly to deliver my gifts, and I have had to call in my favors. I need you to deliver some of my gifts this year." The fat old man laughed and coughed until his cheeks were rosy. But Crimboblin raised what could charitably be called an eyebrow and said, "But the mere sight of my non-Euclidean form, my uncanny stench drives even the most stalwart mortals to madness, old fellow." Now, there's a place for everyone in Santa's great projects, and I'm sure you haven't forgotten how I covered for you with that terrible squid man. It'd be a shame if he were to identify that fluid he found in his Shoggoth partner's room, Santa said with a smile that felt a bit evil to Crimboblin. Crimboblin knew better than to continue challenging the Red Tyrant, so he nodded what could be called his head and gulped back some of his nogoos with his 15 gibbering mouths. A group of giggling elves, who were, as he already knew, contractually obligated to giggle by Santa, carried out a sack of gifts, then tossed them to the snakes along Crimboblin's back. Crimboblin began the long crawl into a customized sled, led by a group of enchanted goats, as apparently the reindeer went on strike when they realized it was Crimboblin they would be dragging, the terrible Nogman horror that slid around on his own drool. Crimboblin waved his snakes and gurgled in a percussive manner that resembled the famous ho-ho-ho. But the elves were drinking up his trail of nog slime and failed to notice his departure into the snowy skies. Ding, 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 ding. So the first prompt we got was a couple moved in together at the start of December. They've not finished unpacking, so you'll need to weave around bags and boxes. The Stewartsons were two handsome young men who had lived on their own for less than 2 months before moving in with one another. They were a sporty and active couple, but they were young and were accustomed to their family filling the gaps in their chores. Thus, when Crimboblin arrived at their small, slender trailer near a mountain bike trail, his first observation was that the windows were being blocked by unopened moving boxes. And when he slithered in for a closer look, he found that the path to their door was a circuitous romp through half-filled bags of leaves, stacks of old newspapers, and other such detritus. As Crimboblin grew closer and closer to the trail, he eventually could hear that inside an argument was taking place. One voice shouted, "My God, man, have you used all the bowls already? I just washed them last week." And a deeper voice replied, "Bowls? You're worried about bowls? I've no socks because you won't change the dryer out. It's been 3 weeks. It's not my responsibility to load the dryer and empty it. You have to do something around here. Well, it's not my responsibility to collect up all the bowls you leave in your room." By now, the argument was becoming heated. But Crimboblin knew the solution. Each partner would have to agree to a schedule of chores evenly split between them. For as they moved into this new phase of life, where their parents no longer managed the chores, they had to learn the intricacies of a couple's independence. Crimboblin wished he could explain this to them, but to expose himself would violate Santa's protocol, so instead, he started to search for a place to leave their dual kayak, their gift. An object half the length of their whole home, maybe an ill-advised request on their part. However, the one thing the couple did do well was decorate their small trailer with many blinking lights. And this was the particular delight of Crimboblin's mane of snakes, who loved the lights of Christmas. And they began to hiss and rattle in celebration of the beautiful presentation of the twinkling lights upon the eaves of the house. And this hissing and rattling was just enough ruckus to draw the attention of the couple. Crimboblin, realizing they were coming out to check the yard, hearing them at their door, opened his 15 mouths and vomited his nog goo so he could slip silently into the bushes. He tossed the wrapped kayak behind him and watched as the boys found it in their yard. They smiled. What a wonderful moment. At first, anyways. And Crimboblin felt the warm joy of Christmas in his pouch of 6 dozen donor hearts. But then they saw the trail of nog goo and how it led into their bushes, and they became concerned. They called out and grew closer, so Crimboblin decided this was fate. The real gift he would give this year to the young couple was the gift of marital advice. And so he cleared his 15 throats and began to speak about their troubles and how to solve them. Slowly he slid out of the bushes. My dear children, what you must do is make a schedule where both of you, Crimboblin began. But then the boys interrupted with a blood-curdling scream so loud and long that one collapsed into his weakened legs, and the other, still screaming, began to try to drag that partner away from what was an emerging eldritch horror. This was complicated as his partner was weeping in terror and slipping on the foul eggnog leavings streaked across their yard. Crimboblin tried to reassure them by stating that actually he was Santa Claus and he came in peace. This didn't help. He then began to whistle in approximation of silver bells from all of his 15 bubbling mouths at once. And this screeching, squealing, and slurping mess of noise was the last straw for the boys, who did find peace in a way as they both passed out in a terror that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. And they slipped into really the first of a lifetime's worth of repeating nightmares. The gift didn't go quite as Crimboblin has planned, although there is a silver lining in every cloud. You see, they no longer engage with the Santa myth and sweat when the name is even mentioned. And it is said, though, that little silver lining is that they keep their yard and their floor very clean now, for they came to believe that it had emerged and grown from their mess. And so just in case, they now keep it quite clean. And besides the screaming and the sweating night terrors, they are much better for it. Zombie Wolf says, Aspie, man, are you even trying? You forgot Snaky. No, I just want to be clear. I wasn't trying. Names are my kryptonite. Jumpstore says, a crime or an utter masterpiece created by a gang of absolute mad lads. I mean, obviously that's true. Zombie Wolf says, exposing oneself to strangers in their home probably violates a few laws. Definitely. Jumpstore says, at least his husband didn't leave him behind. Love in the face of fear is true love. We found a warm core to our terrible story of the Eldritch Horror. Okay. Well, that was good fun. I enjoyed my time here. I hope you folks did too. I can't get this thing to center and it's driving me nuts. GS says, a cute little moral tale. Monsters can grow from your mess. There you go. That's what I should do. I actually had an idea for a solo tabletop RPG. I don't know if I'll put it up on Itch or anything like that, but I might try to design it for the end of the season. I'm not going to say what it is in case I never get it done, or in case I do, it'll be a surprise. But I know that, I won't call them out, but one amongst our numbers is also working on a solo tabletop RPG for Christmas. And that would be very cool, because there are Christmas themed things in games and stuff, but most of them aren't solo. And I feel like that's sort of a missing, we're missing an opportunity. I think there's lots of cool structures of solo tabletop RPGs that could really work with Christmas stuff if you are interested in that theme. But for me, I want to say thank you to Jumpstore, Zombie Wolf GS, Holly's House, Witchery, Ain, and I feel like I'm forgetting someone. Oh, Genera, and GS. And Drew. That's right. That's who I'm forgetting. Big Drew. It has been a great night with the chat. I really enjoyed it. And I hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you did, consider giving the video a like. It doesn't really matter because this is so niche. It's never going to do big on YouTube, but it is just a way of like saying thanks for free if you enjoyed yourself. Beyond that, my name is Rory. Your name is yours. And you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Get out of my shop.